All right, so good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. If you're joining us for the first time, and I know we have so many folks joining us for the first time today, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And I'm particularly excited today because we are starting a new week, but if you joined us last week on YouTube or live, you will have seen that we did the largest climate festival in our history. 22 programs in 5 days, everything from islands disappearing under the waves in the Pacific to remote trappers' cabins in northern Norway. You can check out all those incredible programs where we reached thousands of kids at our climate change section of our site or on YouTube. And I'd really encourage you to do so to follow up after today's exciting Arctic presentation as well. So our speaker today is someone that I have just seen that no one's career is rising faster in Canadian conservation and science than our speaker today. Dr. Emily Choy is at McGill University in lovely Montreal, and her work has taken her around amazing places in northern Canada to explore seabirds of the Arctic coast. She has been lauded by so many amazing organizations, including L'Oreal Canada, which sponsors and supports some of the most amazing women scientists in the world. So you guys are in for a real treat today. I'm so excited to have her on the broadcast, and I cannot wait for you guys to learn from her, like I'm sure I will as well. Dr. Choy, thank you so much for joining us, and take us away.
Thank you very much for having me, Jesse. I'm so excited to be here today, sharing with you my work. I'll just get my presentation up. I'll just share my screen.
While you're pulling that up too, I want to note, I know we said this before the broadcast, but we had people from 5 countries, 6 provinces, and 5 states register for this program. So one of the most international efforts we've ever done. And with that, your talk is up, and I can't wait for them all to hear from it. Let's do this thing.
Yeah, so for today, I'll be sharing with you my work on Arctic seabirds, but I'll also be talking a bit about my journey to Arctic research, as well as the other types of research I've been doing up in the north. So just to tell you a bit about myself, so I'm from Markham, Ontario, and I grew up, I've loved nature ever since I was a little kid. So I would spend hours upon hours feeding chickadees, catching frogs, catching snakes, catching fish at my grandparents' cottage near Lake Simcoe. But never did I once think I'd end up working in the Arctic. So I actually started working in the Arctic during my master's, where I spent a summer on Cape Vera, Devon Island, which is the place on Earth most like Mars. So it's actually where NASA is doing a lot of work. And as you can see, it's a polar desert. So when I was there, I was studying the impacts of a large seabird colony on the food web. So as you can see in the back, you see these cliffs and the orange lichen. These are where a large northern colony of northern falmers would nest. And so when I was there, I became captivated with the wildlife and landscape. For example, while I was doing my field work on Arctic ecosystems, I noticed that near my field site, there were some Arctic fox kits. So here's a picture of one of the fox kits. So you can see, super cute. And then I saw that there were 2, so there were a couple coming out of the rocks. And then we realized one day that underneath a giant boulder was a den of Arctic foxes. So I love showing this picture to kids because I love asking them, how many Arctic foxes can you see? So this is a great example of camouflage in the high Arctic. And there are several kits in this picture. So take a moment, I'll give you guys a couple minutes, see how many Arctic foxes you can find. So they're quite well hidden.
Yeah, I'm trying this myself too, Emily. This is pretty exciting. I don't know, from where I'm sitting, I think 3, 4, maybe there's like 97 and I'm just really unobservant. I don't know. If our classes have any thoughts, they can type in the chat. What do we got? 4 in the chat from our group in Prince George, BC. If you're on YouTube, you want to share too? Oh, comments, what do we got? I see 6, wow. Juliet and Oshawa see 6, okay. 5 from Miss Hughey's class. We're in the same ballpark here, 4 through 6. 4 from Miss Wilson's class. Okay, there's our live groups. Emily, what do you think?
Well, you guys are doing really well. So in this picture, there's actually 5 kits. So here they are, 1, 2, 3. One's hidden underneath the rock, 4 and 5. But underneath this giant boulder, there were actually 9 fox kits. So there was a mother fox that had 9 kits. And then we would watch her every day. She would work so hard, bringing back chicks and eggs to feed her kits. So after I was doing my master's work, I actually worked on Arctic beluga whales in the Nunavut settlement region of the Northwest Territories. So I was studying Beaufort sea beluga whales and the effects of environmental change on their diets, their prey, and their health. So in this picture, this is actually a mother beluga whale and a calf. As you can see, the calves are gray in color. My internet died.
Oh, it just didn't switch over the slide, but you're still in.
Oh, I'm still in. Sorry.
No worries.
Okay. And this is the Mackenzie Delta. So basically, in order to get to my site, I worked on Kendall Island, and I would take a 4 to 6 hour boat ride up the Mackenzie Delta to work on beluga whales. So here are some pictures from my boat ride. As you can see, we're in the high Arctic. There's still some pine trees. This is a pair of Arctic terns. They're a bird with the longest migration in the world. So they will migrate from pole to pole, the Arctic to the Antarctic. And they would actually nest on the coast of the Mackenzie Delta. And they would dive bomb the researchers upon our approach. This is a stilted sandpiper. So on Kendall Island, there's a very large migratory bird sanctuary. This is a pair of sandhill cranes. And then also during my PhD, I also got to take part in another great Arctic expedition, the Victoria Strait expedition. So I was a scientist for the Weston Foundation, and I took part in the big expedition to find the lost ships of Sir John Franklin. And during this expedition, I also saw some amazing Arctic wildlife, polar bears in particular. So we saw a lot of, we were out during the summer, but on the ice, there were a lot of polar bears that were sleeping. So here's a polar bear yawning, and here's another one sleeping on the sea ice. So next, I thought I'd share with you some of the work I'm currently doing on seabirds on Coates Island. So I'm currently working on Coates Island in northern Hudson Bay, Nunavut. And on Coates Island, there's a colony of about 30,000 breeding pairs of thick-billed murres who nest on the cliffs of Coates Island. So as you can see in this picture, if you look carefully, you see these little dots. Those are all murres. And as you can see, if you look closely at the top, there is a cabin. And so during the summer, so in May to August 2019, my team and I, we stayed at the camp at the top of these cliffs, and we would basically there was basically a ropes course that would help us to study the seabirds. So here's some closer up pictures of the birds on the cliffs. So they don't actually build a nest. They'll each pick a spot on the cliff ledge where they will lay their eggs. And thick-billed murres will lay 1 egg per breeding season. So they'll raise 1 chick per season. The birds will arrive around mid-May to early June. They start to lay their eggs around mid-June to early July. And then once the chicks hatch, they will fledge or leave the nest around the 1st or 2nd week of August. And actually, when they leave the nest, they'll actually jump off of the cliffs, and they will be fed by their fathers at sea, while the mother basically will stay behind and feed. Now, although the murres will spend their summer on Coates Island, they actually winter off the coast of Newfoundland and Labrador. So here's a close-up picture of some murre chicks or murrelets and a couple of parents. This is after banding. So these aren't all the chicks of these 2 parents. The parents are returning to their nests. And murre parents will each take 12-hour shifts incubating their nests and looking after their chicks. So basically, while one parent is looking after the chicks and incubating the eggs, the other parent will be foraging at sea and bringing back food. So usually during the daytime, the father will stay with the chick and incubate the chick and eggs, whereas the mother will forage for food. And during the nighttime, they switch. So the mother will stay on the nest, whereas the father will forage at sea. Now, thick-billed murres mostly feed on fish. So here's a picture of a couple of murres feeding on fish. So this looks like a capelin. And over the past 30 years, there's been a lot of changes in Hudson Bay with the warming of the climate. So over the past 30 years, the diets of murres has shifted from about mostly Arctic cod, like an Arctic fish, to capelin with the warming of Hudson Bay. So capelin is more of an Atlantic southern species. Now, as a result of this shift, it's believed that this change has caused a decrease in the growth rates or the size of chicks, because murre parents will each bring back one chick at a time to their offspring, to their chicks. And because capelin are slightly smaller than cod, it's believed that this difference in body size has caused a decline in the growth of the chicks. So this is a picture of a chick wolfing down a fish. This looks like a fish called an eel doctor. And as you can see, they'll basically just swallow it whole. And sometimes these fish will be much longer than the chick itself. Now, a really interesting thing about murres is that they can dive up to about 200 meters in a matter of minutes, but they also fly about 4 hours a day. And in birds, flying and diving are an energetic trade-off, and it's very difficult to do both. And a great example of this is the penguin, which I'm sure everyone has heard of. The penguin is an amazing diver, but over time, over evolution, it's lost its ability to fly. Well, murres are like a flying penguin. So they're built like a diver, but they can still fly, but they have to expend a lot of energy in order to fly. So it's very hard for them to fly. So just to give you an idea of some of the work I do. My project mostly looks at the effects of Arctic warming temperatures, and changes in diet on the energy of the birds. But we have a lot of tasks we do on Coates Island. So here's a picture of us. So some of the things that we do is that we check for eggs on the cliffs. We check for chicks. We measure eggs. We measure chicks. This is a picture of myself and Josiah. Josiah's been working for almost 30 years at Coates Island. He's from Coral Harbor. And we're just basically banding adults. So we're checking the band numbers of adults. So we have little bands on the legs of the adults. And so we're basically checking to see who's on what nest. And we're also banding new adults. So you can see that there's some that are colored. Those are the ones that we've already checked. So we capture the adults using a noose pole. So this basically has a pole with a rope that slides around their neck. And as you can see, safety is very a top concern when working on the cliffs. We're all trained in rock climbing. So we have rope that helps us to rappel down to our areas on the cliffs. So I thought I would just share with you some videos of the cliffs and the seabirds, just to give you an idea. So these videos are all by Douglas Noblet, who is a photographer on Coates Island. So here's some pictures of the cliffs up coast. As you can see, there's up to 30,000 breeding pairs. There's a really large colony of birds. So they're just flying around. And I'll just show you another. Here's another one a bit further away from the colony, just to give you an idea of just how vast this colony is. You can see these little boxes. These are blinds. So we use these for basically spying on the birds. We do feeding watches. And so when we're there, the birds can't see us, but we can see them. So they're great. And here's another picture of the cliffs. And in this video, you should be able to see the murres, how they're flying in a circle. Well, we call this the murricane. We're not sure why exactly they fly in this repetitive circle, but it's really, really interesting to watch. So it's currently being studied. But as you can see, this is how big the cliffs stretch. So there's the hurricane going round and round. There's a lot of other animals around Coates Island. There's also a large pod of beluga whales. Again, another video. These are all videos by Douglas Noblet. And as you can see, so there's a Hudson Bay pod of beluga whales. And you can see, if you look carefully, you can actually see these are mostly mothers and their calves. So the gray whales are calves, and the white ones are mothers. And then finally, also, as well, there's also a very large colony of walrus that like to basically sunbathe at Coates Island. So here is a video of the walrus colony. Now, if you look carefully too, you can see walrus calves. So here's one right here. And you can see their tusks. And when you're there, you can actually smell them from about a mile away. So they're quite stinky. But they're basically, during July, they like to use the coasts of Coates Island to basically sunbathe and forage. Here's a few videos of us doing work. So as I mentioned, one of the jobs we have to do is measure seabird eggs. So here's a video of me measuring the width of the egg, and you can see the birds below.
Long, narrow egg.
There's still a lot of sea ice left in July or in June.
104.
And so we're doing this to monitor the growth of the eggs. So how far along in development the chicks are based on the size of the eggs.
82.2.
There's some glaucous wing gulls, or glaucous gulls. They're really big.
49.2.
Lots of birds. And then here's a video. Another activity I do is there's also feeding watches. So in order to keep track of what the birds are eating, we'll actually sit in the blinds and just basically record what prey or what fish they're bringing back to their chicks. So here's a mer chick in the corner. You can see it's like a mini mer. And if you listen carefully, you can actually hear the laughter of the mers at the end. And then here's my last video. Here's a video of me doing some nest checks. So I'm basically checking to see how many chicks there are, how many eggs there are. I wear a GoPro when I'm doing my work just to keep track, seeing if there's any new eggs or new chicks. So it's part of our kind of daily routine at the colony. So each of us, we're on a team of about 6 people, and we each have our area on the cliffs where we do our work. So this was my area. You can see, going back to the chick. Over on the right, I don't know if you saw it, but there's a glaucous wing gull. So there are big gulls, and the murres have to be careful, or the gulls will actually try to steal their eggs as well. So they have to. That's why they're always kind of guarding their eggs from these gulls that will basically steal them if they're not watching. They also get their eggs sometimes stolen by foxes as well, and polar bears if they're very hungry. So I would just like to acknowledge, obviously, my field team and my advisors. This was I'm presenting some of my work, but this is actually a larger team project that I couldn't have done without the help of my team. And then finally, thank you for your attention, and I'd be more than happy to answer any of your questions.
Emily, that was so much fun. Thank you so much for sharing your story and those amazing videos. It's so fun seeing the comments come in on YouTube from classes around the world for that. That was awesome. So we're going to dive in with questions. As you said, we've got 4 live groups. Carlos joining us in Prince George. If you could share in the chat bar all our other live teachers, I'll come to you in a minute directly. And then we've got a bevy on YouTube. So actually, I'm going to start with a question on YouTube to give our live classes just a second to think. But Emily, our first question from Miss Wu's class, joining us in Houston, Texas. They want to know what the biggest egg you've measured is, and have you ever been attacked by a mama bird while measuring their eggs? My question exactly.
Oh, that's a good question. I can't recall the exact measurements. I mean, they were like, we measured them and they're about, I think 70 centimeters. They're not very big. They're kind of like a pretty large, they're larger than a chicken egg. So it's kind of like a mega chicken egg. And I think we are actually often, we're not really dive bombed by the murres. We get actually dive bombed by the gulls, the glaucous gulls will dive bomb us. But if we're handling the murres, they will try to nip you. So you have to be very, very careful. They have sharp beaks, and they'll just basically grab onto your most sensitive parts of your skin, like your fingers or in between your fingers, and they won't let go. So yes, I often got bitten by murres.
The perils of field work, but a very, very cool place to have that sort of difficulty happen, as opposed to the red-winged blackbirds that soon will be attacking us all here in Toronto and across Ontario just for walking down the street. Miss Hughey's class joining us in Hamilton. If you guys have a question to kick us off live, come on in, unmute that mic, and you are all set to go. Hi, Miss Hughey.
Hello. Thanks again. So as I was saying before, we're doing biodiversity. So I'm super interested in all of this. I can't get over them laughing at the end. It's so loud and like so visible. Yeah, very, very cool. I'm interested to do some more research after. Our question that a student in my class asked that got me thinking as well is he's wondering, how do seabirds and birds that live near the coast, how are they able to fly for such long periods of time over top of water without landing?
Well, these birds, although they fly for long hours a day, they're constantly just basically they're foraging. So they tend to make short trips, like I'd say less than 30 minutes, and then to their basic, to their foraging habitat, where they will basically dive or swim in the water for their prey, and then they come back. So their long migration, their long periods of flight is actually during migration, and it's still being studied. But during their time at coats, they actually fly for short periods, but for a lot during the day. So many foraging trips in order to feed their chicks.
Yeah, I was hoping we were going to get a question about flying. And by the way, Murricane has got to be the dorkiest, funniest, best name for a group of things happening to animals of all time. So thank you for that. That said, to Ms. Wilson's class, also joining us in Hamilton. If you want to unmute your mic, come on in. And then we'll come to Ms. Rambaran in a minute. Hi, Ms. Wilson's class.
So Ron has a question. My question is, like, how do they make sure that, like, the little birds don't, like, the little eggs don't fall, like at the cliff?
Yeah, cool question. Oh, did you catch that, Emily?
Yeah. So how do I make sure that the birds and the eggs don't fall off the cliff? So yes, that's a good question. So yes, we have to be very, very careful when we're measuring the eggs. Usually we find that the cliffs aren't where their ledges aren't very steep. So it's not really a matter of, like if the adult leaves, they might fall off. So basically what we'll do is we'll just basically take the egg from underneath the adult, measure them quickly, and then put them right back on basically a flat surface. And same with the chicks as well. So although, like there's parts of the cliff that are very steep where the adults actually lay their eggs and raise their chicks, there's actually pretty flat. So it usually tends not to happen, but we're very, very careful.
Yeah. One of the cool things with egg shapes in general is that they're designed to sort of just spin in a circle. And you can see this with a chicken egg at your own house. They're not something like a sphere that will actually just roll off the cliff.
Yes.
And it's a big, a reason why they are shaped like way to begin with. So good question, guys. Miss Baran's class, they're joining us in Toronto, where I am. If you guys have one, come on in. Hi, just unmute the mic. There you go. Perfect.
My question is, how long do the MERS live for?
That's a great question. So they're fairly long-lived, and the oldest bird that we studied on Coates Island was 38 in 2019. So we haven't been able to go there last year due to COVID. So hopefully we'll see her next year, and if she's still alive, she'll be about 40 years old. So yeah, they can live up in their 30s, and the oldest one has been 38 so far.
Yeah. That's shockingly old for something that's that tiny. That's really unusual. Yeah. We get the age question a lot, and that does throw me off. That's very cool. Miss DeCanto's class, we're going to go to YouTube for just a minute. Miss DeCanto's group wanted to know, when do chicks leave to fish for themselves? They're joining us in Ottawa today.
Yes. So basically, when the chicks fledge, when they leave, they are fed at sea by their fathers. It's not sure. I don't know if it has been studied how long this is done, but it's for a portion of their migration back. So the fathers and the chicks will actually paddle part of the migration back to their wintering habitat off the coast of Newfoundland and Labrador. And then once the chicks at this point are still growing, so they're not adult size. So once they're adult size, they will actually be able to fly the rest of their way back. And it's probably at this point where they're able to forage for themselves. So yes, it's during their migration, once they've basically reached adult size.
Yeah, super cool. All right, I want to take a question from a student in Shelter Bay Public School. She wants to know, how do you stay so calm near birds? She has a bird nest on her balcony that they think is going to have eggs soon. And she's kind of nervous around birds. So how do you stay so calm with all those birds around you at all times?
Oh, yeah, no. Yeah, like I think I guess I've always been, I guess I've always worked with birds, and I think that I've always kind of been, I guess as long as you kind of respect the bird and be, you're quiet, you're not very noisy, you take into consideration that it's there, and you don't spook them. I think that's a good way for them to stay calm, and then you'll stay calm too.
I guess that's a fair point. You do have the picture of the chickadee in your hand as a little girl. And I mean, it's funny though, a lot of people are really afraid of birds. We found this in a lot of bird programs. It's about 1 in 5 or so are a little nervous around birds, historically speaking. So I'm glad you could answer that. And I mean, if you are nervous around any sort of animal, acclimatize yourself to them. Birds in general aren't typically scary. There are birds like a big swan you maybe don't want to walk up and try and pick up. But if you hang out near birds, if you stay close, if you stay calm, if you respect most animals, you're likely to have a really nice interaction most times. So great question, guys. All right, this is Juliet joining us in Oshawa. She has watched more programs than almost anyone in the history of the broadcast, and she wants to know, what's your favorite part of working with animals from the Arctic, Emily?
Well, I just find them to be amazing. Like similar to MERS, beluga whales, like Beaufort sea beluga whales. One of the aspects of my research was looking at their diving ability. So they can dive over 1,000 meters, and they have a strong habitat association with sea ice. So I think just that they have these amazing adaptations for such a harsh climate. And I think that's what's really drawn me to working with animals in the Arctic.
It's been so special over the last week and a bit doing so many Arctic programs because it's such a unique and incredible part of the world, and getting the chance to paint a picture for Canadian kids who live in a country with these amazing landscapes. You know, when I was a kid, I thought about the Arctic very abstractly. I thought it was constantly frozen, and that's what it was. It was this barren wasteland in the north. And to see so many amazing animals that you showcased today is a really special, opportunity for kids. So I really appreciate that. And that was a great answer. Emily, let's dive in with another round with our live classes. So Miss Hughey, if you guys want to come back in and ask another, come on in and take us away. Hi, Miss Hughey.
Hello again. I'm so excited to ask another one. Okay, so we have a list here of a few, so I'll just go to our next one. Someone is wondering, in North America, what is the largest seabird that exists? What species is, I guess, the largest?
Oh, that's a good question.
No pressure.
I mean, I'd say I think an albatross is the largest. I don't know what their ranges are, but that's a really good question. Definitely on coats, the glaucous gull is the largest gull. It's like this mega herring gull, seagull, but I'd say.
By the way, so this is worth noting. I think a lot of our classes, certainly in Ontario, will have seen seagulls before. And if you've ever seen a herring gull, which I've seen in Algonquin Park, the fact that gulls can get as big as they do, like you assume they're going to be this like regular sized bird, and when they're gigantic, it's really quite terrifying. Albatrosses, yes, was going to be our biggest. I love that this question was brought up. I'm trying to think of the name. Emily, you might know. There's a famous mirror that went extinct that we wiped out. Was this a giant mirror?
Giant hawk or something?
Giant hawk. There we go. Yeah. So one of the great iconic extinction stories of a creature sort of in the last few centuries that went extinct was the great auk. I'll put this in a banner in just a second, but I'd encourage classes to check this out. This is an example of a creature that could have been on Earth today that isn't because of our actions, and so it really sort of drives home the point that it's really important to care for and protect these amazing animals and their ecosystems. So cool. We went all sorts of segues with that answer. Ms. Wilson's class, if you guys have another one for us, come on in and share away. Hi, guys. Unmute the mic, and then we're good to go. There we go. Perfect.
There we go. So my question is, do those birds take care of each other like family? Like babysitters and stuff?
Yeah, so are you asking if the birds care for one another's young, or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, our parents they'll take care of their chicks, and sometimes we see, I believe that we see like adoptions of if a MERS lost a chick, they'll take a new one, but they usually take care of their own chick. So that's basically how they work as a family. So it's basically families of 3 around the cliffs. Yeah,
I mean, it's fascinating to see, like 100+ birds on one little tiny cliff face together. So they don't peck or do they peck each other? Or do they have sort of like their own little mini territory like penguins do? Or yeah.
Yes, they do. So if one gets too close to the other's nest, they'll peck a bit, and so that does happen.
Yeah, I like that question, guys. Thank you so much for that. We're whipping through these, Emily. This is awesome. I'm going to go to Miss Rambaran's class, and then we'll take a couple more from YouTube before maybe even doing another round. You guys are so fast with this. Back in Toronto, unmute that mic, and you are all good to go.
Has climate change affected the birds?
So yes, it has. So one of the things we've found that is over the past 30 years, the diets of MERS have changed. So they've been, most of their diet has historically been Arctic cod, but it has now shifted to capelin, which is a smaller fish. And so this shift is believed to have caused a decline, basically a decrease in the growth of chicks. There's other aspects have affected the birds as well. So the ice-free period has advanced by about a month around Coates Island, which is where prey is at its most abundance, whereas the nesting period of MERS has only advanced by about a week with Arctic warming. So both the ice-free period and the nesting period have advanced with Arctic warming, but there's also a mismatch between when prey is most abundant and when birds need the most energy, which is during the chick rearing. So yes, there's been a number of changes with climate change. Did
you really say that the ice-free periods changed by a month? Since you
About a month.
You started studying it, or since like we've done records in general?
Yeah, since the program. So like Tony Gaston and like the program's been going on. So it's it's been advanced by about a month.
Still, though, I mean, it's absolutely shocking. We covered again a few programs last week on Arctic sea ice changes over the last few decades, and it's really quite astonishing to see how much it's changed. When I was the age of the kids in these classrooms, we were projecting things, distantly in the future, 2050s, 2100, and it's happening right now. It's one of the most, I guess, troublesome things about climate change is that it's exceeding our expectations of how fast it's going with these feedback loops that are really changing a lot of habitats for creatures worldwide. So I'm glad we got that question. Thank you so much, Mr. Ambrose. Carlos's group joining us in Prince George, BC at the Exploration Place, one of my favorite science centers in Canada. They want to know, have eggs fallen down the cliffs? And if so, what do mothers do when that happens?
Yes, so occasionally an egg does fall off the cliff, particularly like during days when it's windy. So if there's wind, then there's a risk of eggs falling off the cliff. And if that happens, there's not much the parrots can do. I mean, if the egg, sometimes it'll fall or move close to the nest, and therefore they can just re-nest somewhere. But if they lose an egg earlier on, what they'll do is they'll lay a second egg. But if it's too late in the breeding season, like if it's like late July or late July or mid-July, then they'll usually abandon and they won't be able to have a chick.
I find it really interesting, though, that if it's early in the season, they actually have like the energy amount to be able to create another nest and to try that out and hopefully flood something. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Cantor's class wants to know, how long have you been doing this kind of work? It's sort of our classic background question. When did you start in this field and how long have you been at it?
So I've been working in Arctic research for about 15 years, I believe. I started with my master's work where I did a bit of seabird work. I also worked at Environment Canada on tree swallows, and then I continued my Arctic work on belugas and now thick-billed murres. So I've been working exclusively on the murres since 2008, so about 3 years.
Yeah. And as a quick follow-up on this, because we get this all the time, so how long was your educational journey? So you finish high school, you're ending grade 12. How many years after that to get where you are today?
Oh, boy. So I guess I've been, about 15. Well, I took some breaks. I worked in between both my master's and PhD and postdoc, but I guess about 15 years.
Which I always, I mean, it's alarming. You actually recoiled there for a second. And I always like to highlight for kids, it's so daunting to think about, being in grade 3, being in grade 4, going to grade 12, and then having so much schooling after that. But if you do that, you end off really young. You end up with a career that's exciting and fulfilling and awesome, and you get to hang off the side of sea cliffs if you'd like to, studying birds. Like, that extra education bit, it's not for everybody, but if you do choose to do it, you end up with something that can be really, really, amazing for the rest of your life. So I always like to highlight that question. Emily, we got time for 3 more quick questions with our live groups. Again, this is like amazing Q&A. Miss Hughey, the most enthusiastic seabird teacher of all time. I'll bring her back first. Go for it, Miss Hughey.
I like the title. Thank you. I have a question about seabird diets, which I know might be very broad, so we'll take whatever answer you can give us. We're wondering about some of my grade 6s about, is the reason why they live near water primarily diet based, or is it also their lifestyle as well? And in terms of diet, what contributes to most of their diet? I know that there's like so many species, but if you had to pick even just the murres, I guess, what is most of their diet?
Yes, so they live next to on the cliffs for a variety of reasons next to the coast. So one of them is for diet. I mean, the Arctic is very rich with forage fish and very, very highly productive. So there's lots of good prey for their chicks. There's also a lot of safety having nests around the cliffs. So, there's not a lot of predators. It's more north. So yes, there's some safety. Yes, obviously it's very difficult to climb the cliffs. So there's some strategy in terms of having your nests up there. For the murres, their main diet is fish. So it was Arctic cod. It's now capelin, but there are a variety of species around northern Hudson Bay, such as capelin, I said capelin. Sculpin, there's something called an eel doctor, which is an orange fish. They'll feed on amphipods, so little invertebrates. But seabirds in general, they're pretty generalists. So they can feed, like when I studied northern falmers, they could feed from anything from fish to squid to carrion or dead animals. So they tend to be opportunists.
I love that. Very, very cool question, guys. Miss Hughey, if you guys have more questions too, email me and I'll make sure that Emily gets them, because I know you're just chomping at the bit, which is really exciting. The best problem to have. I'm going to go to Miss Wilson and Miss Rambaran in a minute. I want to take a quick question from YouTube from Mr. Shrowen's class. He's joining us in West Kelowna, BC, and they want to know, how similar are these birds to penguins, and why can these birds fly but penguins can't? So if you could highlight that relationship for us, that would be great.
So they're not related to penguins at all. They're from totally different lineages. But I mean, they have kind of the same strategy as penguins. So they're similar in appearance because they both have adopted the strategy to dive in order to capture their prey. So they can still fly. It just requires a lot of energy for them to do so, and part of it is their kind of wing aspect ratio. So basically the size of their wings, which they use for diving. So they're very good at they act as kind of flippers when they dive, but they've still maintained kind of like a wing size ratio in order to be able to fly.
It's really great when we get the penguin question, because again, so many classes think of penguins, polar bears, that's sort of the two iconic, polar animals, and they're on completely different sides of the globe. Unfortunately, or probably fortunately for the penguins, polar bears and penguins will never meet up in the wild. Penguins are in Antarctica. Polar bears and mirrors and all the amazing animals Emily shared with us today are in Canada's, Russia's, and the US's north. So very cool question, guys. Miss Wilson's class, come on in, and then we'll wrap up with Miss Rambaran in just a minute. Hi, guys.
Have you ever seen an egg hatch?
Have you ever seen an egg hatch, or?
Have I seen an egg hatch? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Yes. So, I mean, I haven't, while I'm doing my nest checks, we'll actually check to see when if an egg's been picked. So that means there's basically a hole. That means the chick is coming out. Usually, obviously, when the egg hatches, it'll take some time. It'll take like hours for it to hatch, but I have seen eggs being picked. So basically, the chick's starting to crack open the egg, and it's usually by the next day the chick will be out of the egg.
Yeah, what a special experience! What a unique thing. I mean, so few of us will ever get to see that exact moment of hatching. So I'm really glad we got that question. Very, very cool. Emily, we'll wrap up with Miss Rambrand again down the street from me here in Toronto. Come on in, guys, and go for it.
What has been your favorite animal to study?
Oh, that's a great question. Oh, that's a hard question too. I think I do like working with MERS. So MERS, one of the nice things about seabirds is that they're, we do a lot of radio tagging on them. They're very accessible. So they're on their nests, so they're very easy to put we put mini backpacks on them in order to basically monitor when they're flying and what their behaviors are. But they're also really amazing, as you can see. I really like the aspect of MERS that they're just this amazing flyer that can also dive, and they're just a very, very hardy species too. So yes, so I guess the MERS the winner there.
You actually are one of the most concrete people on your favorite study animal of all time. Like most people are really worried. I mean, this is a testament to how cool this is. There's so many animals you've had the chance to experience and explore and work with. Is there anything next? I mean, MERS might be it for a while. Is there anything you'd really like to study that you haven't had the opportunity to yet?
I'd love to work on penguins one day, but then I'd have to go to the Antarctic.
We'll send you down there. Come on. McGill should do that. We'll write him a letter. That's what the classes can join me at the end. Emily, this has been so much fun. I really appreciate your time today. I want to stress for our kids tuning in, there's so much more of Emily's work online. You can check her out on Google. You can check her out on social media here. It's just such a fun opportunity to hear a new story from you today. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
What we're going to do now at the end of every broadcast, Emily, I bring in all our live classes to say a big thank you and goodbye with me. So Miss Hughey, Miss Wilson, Miss Rambrand, if you guys could all unmute your microphones and join me in saying a big thank you and farewell. You are all in the broadcast. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you so much.